Welcome to Beyond the Balance Sheet, the podcast that helps advisors, clinical professionals, and affluent families understand the complexities of issues related to our mental, physical, and emotional well-being. Our co-hosts, Arden O'Connor and Diana Clark, will interview a series of guests on a range of topics, providing informative content and practical tools for professionals and families to consider. Here are your hosts, Arden and Diana.
Welcome to an episode of Beyond the Balance Sheet. I am Diana Clark, and today I am joined by Jay Bacrania, who is the CEO and co-founder of Signet Education, along with Sheila Akbar, who is the president and COO and a resident admissions and test prep expert for Signet. Jay co-founded Signet Education after graduating in 2005 from Harvard and found the idea that there would be more supports helping people develop what they are going to need to overcome challenges and make successful decisions in college. Welcome to Beyond the Balance Sheet, Jay and Sheila.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
So, as I was saying, Signet Education was founded to help students and parents navigate school successfully. Tell us about your backgrounds and why you started Signet and what you love about doing it.
Sure. I'll take this first. My background is quite varied. In high school and college, I'll say that kind of the general theme in terms of why I started Signet Education with a friend of mine and what our goals was really to express this desire that I've had since I was a kid to just educate and grow through relationships. So in high school and college, I was either started or led 3 different organizations that had to do with mentorship and tutoring. And funny enough, when I graduated, I was like, what should I do with my life? It didn't even occur to me that I should actually take that as data.
That's hilarious.
And I was also a musician at the time, and I was very passionate about music. So I thought for some time that my life trajectory was going to be as a professional musician. And I was tutoring on the side, and eventually kind of came to the realization that music wasn't really what was calling me. It was education, one-on-one education specifically, and then the act of creating a company around that practice to try to reach this ideal that I've had for a long time in my mind of a company that could do what we're doing. And that was all kind of pretty close to after college, and it's been just a great and amazing ride since then, just really trying to bring this vision to life.
I would imagine that the same process you used to decide to embark upon Signet Education, like using clues about your history, is part of the process you use with students when they're looking for schools. Is that right?
100%. You know, there are a couple of big ideas or principles that I'd say undergird what we do at Signet. And one of them is that, you know, we have to, we call it, you have to zigzag to really find your place in the world. And that's a big part of what we're doing, is trying to empower people to find their place in the world. And you have to do something for a little while and then get the information from that. How did it work for you? How did you do at it? How did you like it? How sustainable is it? And then decide what to do next. And it's kind of this ping-ponging or zigzagging until you get closer and closer and closer to, this idea that there's something out there, or maybe a set of things that we can all find that are meaningful to us, that the world needs, right, where we can make a living from, and that we're good at, and we see that success with. So that's certainly a underlying principle of how we work with our families and students. But Sheila, I'd be curious to hear what you think about that.
Yeah, me too.
Sure. Yeah. It's always interesting, Jay, to hear you talk about your journey towards this, because my journey was so different. I worked my way into Signet. Jay and I are old friends. We went to college together. And I had been doing a number of other things. I worked on Wall Street. I worked in recruiting. I worked in publishing for a little bit. And then I decided to go back to grad school, and I did 2 PhDs. I work on literature and some foreign languages. And I was writing my dissertation And I, loved teaching, and I needed to pay the bills because grad school doesn't pay. And so I linked back up with Jay and started tutoring, and soon just saw his vision for the services that we provide at Signet, and for building a really beautiful company and group of educators. Was so inspired by that, and frankly liked it more than doing my dissertation work, and that kind of is what drew me in. And I've been with Signet for 11 years now, and really have loved every minute of it. And it's, questions like yours, Diane, that, keep me coming back to this. There's always a new challenge. Every student is so unique, and it is a little bit of a puzzle to help them put it together about, drawing on these past clues that you mentioned, things that you have always been drawn to, things that you've liked in the past, things that you have been told you're good at, or you recognize that you're good at, things that you draw, satisfaction and meaning from, and helping students kind of explore all of those things to figure out what could their path be. And there are always multiple paths, right? So it's really exciting and rewarding to help students navigate all of those twists and turns, because, I myself went through all of them. I know, Jay, you did too. And it just feels so good to be able to give back in a way, and to pass on, the knowledge that we've gained through all of our trials and tribulations, to make some, additional use of that. It feels really great.
I like that. So, Jay, you started the business in 2005. Has your vision shifted?
Great question. I would say it's evolved. There's some core parts of it that are still the same, and there are parts that have definitely, that I have now of it, that just required the experience that we've gone through in order to even formulate. So, for example, we founded the organization with the idea that relationships are what drive education. And we've always been one-on-one, and we've always believed that when you sit down across from a student or with a student and you're working with them, the most important factor in whether or not that student will be able to successfully meet their goals or become educated in the work we do is the relationship that you have. If you've got a great relationship, that opens all the doors or opens many of the doors, probably not all of them, to success in academics, because that's when you can create trust, you can create vulnerability, you can understand where a student's real weaknesses and fears are, you can push them, you can celebrate with them. And it's something that as we all know, people, especially teenagers, they can smell when somebody's being inauthentic quite easily. And it's that authenticity of relationship that really opens things up for success. And it makes it way more fun for everyone. And so that's been a guiding principle from day one. But something that's changed or evolved, for example, is when we first started, we focused primarily on test prep and academic tutoring. But now we're thinking, over the years, we've developed several different capacities, and we now think about the whole academic journey, typically in high school or starting a little bit before high school, to and through college. And we really think about this from a much broader perspective than just your test prep and your tutoring. So the seeds of that, the relationship, the whole holistic, yeah, exactly, much broader than just getting into college. So those seeds were there, but it took years of doing things to have them kind of watered and sprouted into what we have as the vision now.
Do you work with people who have executive functioning struggles or learning disabilities? And if so, what are some methods that you use to engage a student who really is having difficulty?
Sure. Yeah, it's something we do quite a bit of. I'm very familiar, and Sheila will probably be smiling. We can't see her on camera here, but she'll be smiling. I'm very familiar with executive function challenges because I have, many of them, perhaps all of them myself. And as a part of, our service for that actually grew out of my own trying to figure out how do I run this business in my life. And at one point early on, I was in music school. How do I try to do all these things? And I started to develop tools and kind of techniques to do it. And eventually that then, over time, very slowly evolved into our practice of working with students with executive function challenges. And I'd say that, there are tons of specific things that we could cite, how to keep a task list or calendar or do a daily wrap up or a check-in. But really what I think is the meta principle here that we're always trying to work on is to have students to hold and create space and trust and inquiry for students such that they can start to reflect on their own journey and their own practice and say, okay, I'm having trouble here. Why? What's going on? What specifically is causing me challenges? And then how do I start the process of building a structure for myself with, of course, the help of a coach and many other people in their lives to then meet that specific challenge? Because while there are clearly diagnoses and ways to say, well, this student has weakness in task initiation, or this student has a weakness in, general executive function, or this student is, has a slow processing speed. None of that actually translates directly into a straight line to, well, task initiation means you have to approach it this way. There's always the complexity of the human being, the emotions, everything else involved. And so really what we're trying to do with our students at kind of a ground level, before we even start thinking about specific tools and techniques, which we do a lot of, we're really trying to create that habit of reflection and self-understanding that then allows us to build something on really solid ground for them when it comes to what kind of task list to use and what kind of check-in and how to keep track of your assignments and how to start papers early and chunk things up. All of that stuff has to be built on what's really actually the challenge and what's really going on. And the student really has to be engaged and want to build that. So that's kind of the thing I would offer you, is that meta skill of reflection and self-understanding that then gives us the foundation to build on top of.
If I can add something here, one of the things I think that is so, frankly, it's just radical to some parents when I talk to them about this, is that we trust the student to start to solve some of these problems for themselves. And of course, we're not going to set them afloat and, expect them to do it overnight. We're there to support them, offer suggestions, help them struggle through that reflection process and identifying, what are the sticking points? Why is this hard? And help them, iterate until they get to a solution that actually works for them. But there's so many families that say, well, if my kid had any idea what the problem was, they would have solved it. Or if my kid knew what to do, we wouldn't need you. They would have done it by now. You can't just leave the student to figure this out. And actually, I think that's half the battle, is creating the space for a student to feel safe in exploring what some solutions might be, or even just exploring what the problem might be. They've never really been given the opportunity to do that. And in that way, this is a real growth opportunity for them to just take ownership of their lives and their struggles. And I think that is a very different way of approaching this than a lot of other people do. So like Jay said, we have a lot of tools. We'll teach you how to use a calendar. We have systems and routines and all sorts of things that we can do. But it's really got to start with that student taking that ownership and taking that initiative and going on that journey with the coach to figure out which tools and exactly how and when to implement them. That's really going to make the difference.
So what I'm hearing is you're teaching students not just what to do, but how to think. And in the thinking, they will be growing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a very nice way of putting it.
Yeah, you summed up quite a few minutes of my conversation, but I think it's teaching them how to think. And there's another piece of this, which is also helping them to connect with, well, let me put it another way. So education is typically kind of, we're marched through the way that our educational system works. We're typically marched through with a couple of choices here and there, an educational journey. And that educational journey doesn't really fit anyone perfectly, but for a lot of people, it fits them very imperfectly. And what's really important, in addition to teaching students how to think, is teaching them how to actually understand like their own journey. What is their vision? What are they trying to accomplish? Is college right for them? Which college is right for them? How do they contextualize the experience that they're being forced, frankly, to go through with who they are, and then connect those dots? Because if you can do that, then you've solved, so many of the other challenges that students face are symptoms of just not having a good sense of what they're up to and why. So I'd say it's teaching them how to think. And when we say think, it's think about their whole life in context with their education, not just how to solve an SAT problem or how to keep organized better or get more things turned in on time.
So you're dealing with issues that are really going to the heart of parental expectations, right? Where they're going to go to college, how well they're going to do, how do I explain this to my friends, my family, that my loved one may not want or be college bound. And even if they are, how do we keep, or you encourage parents to allow the kids to go through the admission process and not them? How do you get the parents to back off a little bit and set some healthy boundaries around it?
That's a great question. I think part of what we do is we set expectations so clearly. Our core values include things like collaborate, teach students, not subjects. And by sort of foregrounding things like that, not the results, but actually the process, I think we scare away some of the parents who really want to go through this process for themselves, as you're saying. But it is certainly a process of education for the parents as well as the student. And what we really believe is if you do this process right, meaning if you look at your education as a catalyst for personal growth, not just a means to an end, a means to a college degree and a career. If you think about it as the place where you get to learn who you are, where you fit in the world, and how you want to interact with the world, then it becomes, I think, a lot easier to think about the college process as something for the student that the parents are supporting. And we really want students to think about what is meaningful to them, both in terms of academic subjects, possible careers, if they're extracurriculars, things like that. And where do they have room for improvement? What are their strengths? And then also connect those sorts of things to goals around what they'll get out of a college experience. So it's not about what kind of college you want to go to in terms of a, reputation or a ranking or, a tier. It's more of what kind of opportunities do you want to and need to pursue in college in order to become the kind of person you want to become. And so it kind of reframes the whole process, and we can really focus on the student and what they need and what their goals are. And then the natural byproduct of that is a good college application. The application ends up being just the documentation of those things that they're already doing in their high school career, as opposed to the reason they're doing all those things in their high school career, if that makes sense.
It makes total sense, because I went the wrong route in raising my son. I kept saying, this counts, and I can't be alone.
Yeah. Well, it's also, when we think about students who are taking a non-traditional path or who maybe are in college but need to take a break, we can't say that we're successful in all cases in connecting with the parents and helping them to see things the way that we see them. But when we are successful, often we're actually leaning on our experience. We've worked with thousands of students for over a decade, and we can tell stories about, of course, anonymously, but about students that we've worked with that have thrived, and on the flip side, students that we've worked with that haven't thrived, who have been in a similar situation. And we can help parents to understand, there's a whole narrative and a whole life that they're dealing with that's theirs. And then there's what their children are going through. And of course that's intertwined. But, our goal is to try to help them understand that at the heart of it, most parents want what is best for their children. And we try to then help paint a picture of, this is where this option might lead you, or this is where this kind of thinking might lead you. This is where this kind of thinking might lead you based on our experience. You want what's best for your kid. How do you want to navigate this? And another piece of this is we really try to get the student involved in the discussion as quickly and as early as possible. But some of this is just hard. Some parents, we have to be honest, and we have to accept the fact that it's going to be really difficult for them to tell the rest of their family that their son or daughter is not going to finish college or is not going to college anymore. It's nearly impossible in certain cases. Mm-hmm. And so we also have to just be really compassionate with that. And there are times where we have to kind of problem solve, and we have to say, okay, we understand that this piece is really valuable to you. We disagree. We think it's going to lead you in a direction that could be challenging. But since it is something that's important to you, how do we actually get this done in a way that then doesn't have a negative impact with the student? So there's also some creative problem solving that can happen there too.
Have you noticed any shifts during the pandemic with mental health issues? I know that parents are struggling, teaching their kids at home, or there's a lot of people under the same roof. Adolescents are struggling as well. That's got to impact what you folks are doing. What have you been seeing?
We saw just a tremendous rise in interest in our coaching services because so many students who really relied on the structure of school and the relationships with their teachers in person or even with their peers that they were seeing on a regular basis to provide the kind of executive function support and structure that they wouldn't otherwise have. When they went to remote schooling, it all just kind of fell apart. And a lot of students realized, or a lot of families realized, that their student had executive function issues or maybe even an undiagnosed learning disability. And I would say almost to the same frequency, we saw a lot of people saying, remote schooling is so much better for my kids than in-person schooling. They're more rested. They're not dealing with like this sort of social distraction and high school dynamics that can be so stressful and cause a lot of anxiety for students. And they're just so much more focused and happier. And in fact, they're excelling in their academic work because they're allowed to move at, a pace that's more suitable to them or what have you. So we saw kind of both sides of that.
Interesting.
But absolutely the pandemic did, I would say, increase demand for supplemental academic support. And it's really opened up a lot of really great opportunities, I think for us, in order to work with families in sort of a more comprehensive way, which is really the vision. Instead of just offering, test prep or algebra tutoring, we can really help them think about the bigger picture. And I think that's one of the things that the pandemic called into question for a lot of people, right? Whether it was about their career path or their educational path or their family setup, their living situation, all of these things, people started to wonder, is this really the best I can do? And so it's opened up a lot of great conversations.
So I just want to step back just a little. A lot of what you're doing is helping kids figure out who they are, who they want to be, what that path would look like, but also navigating that process with parents. And I think the worst example of parents actually owning their kids' college admission process is the admissions bribery scandal. Has that impacted what you guys do or how you approach things at all?
I'll take a stab, and then Sheila, I'd love to hear your take on it too. Because we were so far from that from the start, and as Sheila mentioned earlier, because we emphasize process so much, I think a lot of the clients that ended up choosing us were not really in that mind space anyways. But a couple of things happened. So I do think that in the wake of that scandal, a lot more people were actually interested in hiring a college admissions consultant because they started to realize that this is not just a put your head down, do your best, submit an application, and you'll get to the right place. That that a lot of people are spending lots of money on helping their kids get a leg up. And so I think that there's probably generally more interest in it as a whole. I think that there's always been a bit of skepticism about what college admissions consultants do. I think that was fueled. But generally speaking, I don't think it really changed what we do. And kind of in contrast of helping families get a leg up in a college admissions process, our process is really about how you just framed it, Diana, which is we're really helping them to understand who they are and where does that lead them versus saying, okay, you want to go to Harvard, Princeton, or MIT. How do we shape you into that? Mm-hmm. And there's sort of a metaphor that I've heard and I like to use, and in fact, I was using it before I heard it, but now the person who wrote it is actually way more famous and educated than I am, so I can't claim it. But it's the carpenter and the gardener. I use sculptor and gardener. So in some cases, you can think of the college admissions process as like a sculpture, where you've got a student who's like a block of stone, and you've got to take your hammer and chisel out, and you got to carve them in the image that you think the college wants. And there are lots of people out there doing that. And that's essentially what this bribery scandal was, right? To literally create an image in certain cases of a student in a form that the college would want. Whereas our approach is really, each student is like a seed, and you've got to nurture that seed, and you've got to see what grows. And then once you start to see that plant that's growing, you've got to figure out, where's the best place for me to plant this plant to get what it needs. And for some kids, that of course is a place like, Harvard or Princeton or, any top-notch school. And for other students, it's, we need a smaller school with intimate teacher-student relationships, with a sort of culture that prizes intellectual curiosity above all, and is in a rural setting, right? That's where this kid is going to thrive. And so our job is really to think about it from that angle. And again, because we're so far from that sculptor mindset, which is really what that whole bribery scandal was about, it really, I think it had some effect on us, but, it's pretty quickly passing. Sheila, what do you think?
I'll just add, Diana, when I heard your question, I was thinking about what did we do different operationally? And the answer is sort of nothing, because we've always operated with a lot of integrity. We're a member of the National Association of College Admissions Counselors, which stipulates some very clear ethical guidelines, and every one of our admissions consultants has to sign off on that. They have to sign off and really demonstrate that they understand and can live up to our core values, which we take very seriously. They're not just like a pretty sign on the wall for us. They're really part and parcel of everything that we do and how we operate, whether it's how we treat clients, how we work with students, how we treat each other as colleagues. And so, the culture at Signet is just so full of integrity and full of a sense of wanting what's best for a student and wanting to help a student understand, define and understand what's best for themselves, that, we didn't have to change anything, really. Maybe if anything, we talked more about those values than before, but they had always been a big part of everything we do.
Thank you. So last question. In working with affluent families, because you must, are there specific challenges to working with kids of multi-generational wealth or kids who have trust funds than kids who are being supported independently by their parents?
Yeah, I have had some pretty lengthy discussions with several of my students on this topic. And the one thing that initially comes up when you ask that question is there's a stark difference in the need to move forward between a student or family that has let's take, for example, a student that doesn't have to work and knows that they don't have to work, versus a student who knows they have to go and get a job. There's just a different orientation to their education, or a need for an education, frankly, that a student who knows they don't have to work has, not always, but often, than a student who knows that, look, they are responsible for servicing their student loans. And so what it creates is actually, it's a space where they have less external that is potentially driving them. And sometimes that space is filled with family expectations. And, if they're part of a family business, it might be, you're going to at least navigate to this point in the business. And we see that, and often that can be very positive, though sometimes it can be very challenging. But, I've seen several situations where the student was literally just paralyzed from their ability to move forward was not there because they had no actual need to move forward. And so that's where it becomes really important to dig in and to help a student start to connect to what is it that they're trying to do with their own life. Because they don't necessarily have to do X, Y, or Z thing that most other people around them in their school and in college have to do. And that's a long journey, and often involves multiple people helping. That could be us on the academic and sort of the coaching side. There's generally, we like to work in conjunction with a therapist. And ideally, if we can work, in conjunction with the whole family, that makes sense too. But really, there's sometimes a need to find a source of motivation that's typically different than the source of motivation that many people going to college have kind of ready-made for them. What do you see, Sheila?
Well, first I want to clarify. I think you're talking about people who need to work during college versus people who don't.
No, I'm talking about
college,
people who may
right?
never need to work.
I'm talking about, so for me, I'm kind of talking about exactly what Diana, what you just said. People literally never have to work a day in their lives. They know they've lived a charmed life from early on, and everybody wants them to go to college, but they're like, well, I could or I couldn't, but like, it doesn't really matter.
Right. Yeah.
Of course, there's expectation, but there's no wind in the sails. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I definitely know what you're talking about. There is a kind of inertia, right? That sets in, and then a malaise, and it's just like, what do I do with myself? There's no one expects anything of me, so it's hard for them to think about what do they expect of themselves. So yeah, I agree with that. One of the other things that I would talk about is just the expectations. The college admissions process has changed just radically in the last 15 years, right? It has gotten so much more competitive. I mean, every year, and last year was, of course, the pinnacle of it. Hopefully it won't be as brutal this year, but it gets more and more competitive. More and more students are submitting applications to more and more colleges, and that means the admissions rates are just going down, down, down. And it's very, very difficult. And I think one of the things that comes out of that is that parents' memory of the admissions process and their expectations of it are often not calibrated to the reality, right? Part of it is, they think their child is the best. We all think our children are the best, of course. But part of it is also when they were applying to college, it wasn't nearly as competitive as it is now. And so the expectations can be very, very different. And it can be very difficult to talk to somebody or to educate somebody who has always had everything they wanted about how this process may not yield exactly what they want. And this is not a process that can be controlled in the way they may be able to control other things, given their, financial means. And then the expectations on the other side from students who maybe their family is going to struggle to pay for them to go to college, they tend to have lower expectations of themselves than they probably should. The idea that, what we think of as top tier colleges are only made for the elite classes, that's a self-perpetuating myth in a lot of ways because, or a self-fulfilling prophecy in a lot of ways because, some students just feel like they don't belong at that kind of university, so they're not even going to bother applying. And then, it ends up becoming that way where those universities have to work very hard to create diversity and, other universities don't. So it is interesting how that plays out. We definitely work with a lot of different types of students, but I think what Jay is saying is really connected to that sense of expectations as well. Their expectations of themselves versus expectations of the family.
Yeah, to follow on with that, Sheila, there are a lot of things that money can make easier and to some extent can buy. And as we've seen, that can even operate in the college process itself. But for all its quirks and issues and foibles, the U.S. college process tends to not directly take that into account. Of course, indirectly, students having the privilege of having test prep and tutors and great schools their whole lives, of course, that sort of plays into account. But it's kind of like it can be a rude awakening because it's like, well, what do you mean I can't go to this school? Of course I can go to this school. I went to this elementary school. I went to this high school. I had a tutor for this, and I played this sport. Like, why can't I go to this school? And it might be the student, or it might even be the parents saying that. And for us to just explain that, look, all of those things are taken into account, but there's no way to quote unquote game this system. It can be very challenging for some students and families, but sometimes it can be a really powerful opportunity to grow. So it's just all a matter of how one navigates through there. And we look at our work as really helping people to navigate as gracefully as possible through some of these sometimes really difficult situations.
I imagine that. Well, I want to thank you both, Jay and Sheila from Signet Education, for joining me today on Beyond the Balance Sheet. For our listeners, I hope that you will like us on whatever platform you listen to this podcast. Thank you again.
Thank you, Diana.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to Beyond the Balance Sheet, a podcast designed to help advisors, clinical professionals, and affluent families solve some of their biggest medical, psychiatric, and emotional challenges. Visit beyondthebalancesheet.com to read more about our guests and resources, and sign up for our newsletter.